Good Sunday morning to you, church family, and how you doing? Coming at you here, not live, taped one day previous. But it is Palm Sunday, April 5th, 2020, and how are you doing on this fine, lovely day of ours, huh? All right, so here we are. We're on our last day of our series, and it is Palm Sunday, Hosanna to the King. However, we're not going to do a traditional Palm Sunday message today because we are going to finish up our series this week, and we'll be fresh and ready to go for an Easter message next week. Speaking of an Easter message next week, now we had said that we were going to have the drive-in service over at the high school parking lot. Myself and a number of other clergy had got together, and we had logistically prepared and was ready to go with this whole drive-in service over there. But we have gotten since then some guidance from our district and from the general superintendents that told us it would probably be a better idea if we did not participate in that. And I was actually given more than just it's a good idea, but not to go at all. You see, the deal is this, and I'll explain it like this. It presents too great of an opportunity of temptation, which is what we heard before in one of our hero messages. Even though we know to be safe and our distancing that we're supposed to have, and we stay in our cars and windows rolled up, there's too great a temptation apparently to roll down your windows anyway to say hello. At that point, you're immediately within 6 feet, or to get out of your cars and knock at somebody else's window. Most of the people, and I'll say 90 whatever percent of the people, practice good discipline and security when it comes to the direction that's been given by the governor and the president. There's still the very small percentage that don't, and I guess the deal is if you have a temptation, what are you supposed to do? Distance yourself from that temptation, and so the safe thing for us to do is not to go. Although I was excited because it was a large gathering, and I'm hoping this fosters into something that may be a bit of a revival for Talmadge once or twice a year. And I know I've talked to the other guys. It looks like something may be able to happen where we can have a more intimate time, where we can say hello to each other and hug and shake hands. I'm hoping for that a little later on. But for now, we'll continue to meet just exactly like we are now. And I'm hoping and praying you guys will continue to meet with us here on YouTube. Speaking of which, meeting here on YouTube, I have one other announcement I'd like to make, and that's the fact that we still operate under the same budget whether we come to church or we don't come to church. We still have the same bills. It may be a slightly less if we're not here on Sundays and so on. However, we still need to receive tithes if you are able to, if you haven't been affected greatly in that arena. If you're still able to tithe, we still are hoping that you'll be able to tithe. We have a box out front to drop tithes in, and you could send it in the mail. Either way, it's still, we have a bit of an advantage over other churches because it doesn't take a lot to sustain us. We have a building that is paid for and other, so we don't have as great of bills as other people have. So what tithing we have had in the past will be good enough now, and I pray that you are still able to do so. If not, I do understand that. This is very difficult days that we have here. Okay, so let's move on. We had week 14 last week, and we have week 15 this week. So the 5th of April through the 11th. Chronologically, those are the readings. I hopefully did not mess that up. I'll get to that in a minute. And we used to do 2 at a time, so let me go ahead and give you 2 at a time. You're supposed to pause and write these down. Hopefully you did that with the last one. This is week 16, 12th of April through the 18th of April. Have you got that? Great. All right. I'm assuming you did. We're going to move on to Bible thoughts. Now, I don't have any real good traditional Bible thoughts. Instead, I have more of an announcement because last week I messed up. I didn't know I messed up. I was reading along, and I actually have the book that the chronological stuff is being. And then I came across a psalm. I was thinking, well, I don't remember that in my list. And sure enough, I went back to look at the list, and it wasn't there. And it's Psalm 18. So I would like to tell you, because it was 2 Samuel 1 through 27, and then what was supposed to follow that was Psalm 18. Was supposed to follow chronologically. Now, I'll make a small little mention on why Psalm 18 follows, and that's where Saul's death. David had to overcome Saul's death, or was delivered from Saul's death. And he had that little song melody thing at the end of that 2 Samuel first chapter. And there's something similar to that in Psalm 18. So that's why that's placed chronologically right there. So that's that. Let's move into our message for the day. Our message for the day is our final one for our series. We have 4 individuals on there. We are on a 5th. We did our 4th last week. And that does lead us to our very thought-provoking question for the week. I know you enjoy this, and I know that you can laugh freely since you're in the safety confines of your own home, and nobody's going to judge you when you laugh. And here you go. Here's the question. Are you ready? If Iron Man and the Silver Surfer teamed up, would they be alloys? It is funny. It is funny, and I know you're laughing. I know I'm not laughing by myself here. You, in fact, rewind this and listen to the joke again. It's funny every single time. All right, week 1. Quick little review. Abraham, he is the godfather of faith. No need to go through that. Week 2 was Joseph. He is the one who ran away, and he's the one we were referring to when it came to the parking lot drive-in service. There's no sense in creating an opportunity for temptation for people to fail at temptation. So it's probably best just to separate ourselves from that. And he was, of course, running away. I like that one better. Week 3 was Caleb, and he's, of course, the 12 that went into the promised land, and he is one of the 2 that came back with a good report. And it pleased the Lord, so when he turned everybody else and headed them back out into the desert, he told Caleb personally he was going to see the land that he walked on. And he had patience we should want ourselves in our lives. Because he was an old man when he finally came back, and he was still as expectant of the promise as ever. And we should aspire for that very kind of patience in our lives. I mean, you give us a moment and we lose our patience. Week 4, last week, Samuel. And he, of course, is the unwanted hero. He looks a little bit like the Christian. If you guys are adventuring out in the commission that the Lord has entrusted to us, we're going to feel pretty unwanted ourselves. And that leads us to that last person right there who looks an awful lot like it's a girl. It could be a girl. All right, so today's message is entitled No Fear. No Fear. And we're talking about Esther. We're in the book of Esther. We're in the 4th chapter of Esther, and we're talking about her. Now, before we do, because the book of Esther, beginning to end, it is one complete storyline. And we're in the 4th chapter that we're going to read, so it behooves us to get some context and lay down some storyline so we can understand what's going on by the time we get to the 4th. So, nearly 500 years before Christ, and about 50 years before Ezra had led the Jews back to Jerusalem, we have a significant portion of the Jews held up in the Persian Empire there. And let's see, and that was being led by a particularly odious king named Xerxes. Now, Xerxes, depending on the version of the Bible you use, you'll see the name Xerxes, or you'll see this name, and Hammedatha, something like that. Hammedatha. Good enough, right? Good enough. I practiced that a lot, and I wanted to say it so well that it looked like it's like everyday language for me. But it's not. I have to practice these things. I like Xerxes. I think that sounds like a cool name. In fact, if I had known that faster, I might have suggested that as an alternate name for Ty. But of course, almost every name I came up with was nixed. I'm kind of happy I got Ty out there. Anyways, Xerxes, that's a cool name. Xerxes was in charge. Where are we at? Now, he's a pagan. He didn't know God. He was pretty much a cruel, unpredictable man. He was, and most people that are not necessarily godly, they are driven by some internal desire. And for Xerxes, it's sensual. That's what drives his choices and so on. And so he was having a celebration to kind of highlight the power and the resources that the Persian Empire had, and they had this little party. Lasted 6 months. It's a 6-month party, a 6-month celebration. I can't imagine a 6-month celebration. And it was topped off by a 7-week just fest of drink and food and merriment that's just boiling over. A lot of alcohol, and Xerxes had no problem participating in the alcohol part as well. So, what happened? On the 7th day, he was particularly saucy, and he is, again, he's driven by sensual desires. He calls his queen out, says, I need you to go ahead and parade in front of everybody here without anything on. At least that's my assumption, it says in there. And she says, no, I'm not going to do that. Now, you don't tell Xerxes no, because generally that's against the rules, and you get to die. Right, and then you get to die. That didn't happen. He met with his philosophers and smart people, and what eventually happened is he disposed of his queen. Now, he didn't kill her, because sometimes that's what it means. He just sent her on her way. Your services are no longer required. But he does want a replacement eventually. So the idea that was given to him is have this big beauty pageant. And you can find the most beautiful woman in Persia. And that's where we come across Esther. She apparently is the most beautiful person in Persia. And I got another picture of Esther. Ready? There she is. That's right. VeggieTales covered this story a little bit, and I like using VeggieTales when I can. And I think they look a little bit the same there. I think there's a good comparison. Esther, she didn't really want to be part of all this, as I recall, but she did. Now she finds herself reluctantly as the queen of Persia and Xerxes' new queen. That's how she became queen of Persia. Shortly after this happens, we are introduced to the villain of the story. And his name is Haman. And it sounds like a mean, nasty person, isn't it? I have 2 pictures of Haman as well. There we are. I could have gotten, I guess, the VeggieTale Haman, but it was kind of distorted. We'll just go with these 2 pictures of Haman right here. Now, Haman was absolutely trusted by the king. The king, I don't know what he did to the king, but the king really trusted Haman above all else. You know, the king, so much so that the king passed a decree that all commands and officials must bow down to honor Haman. Whenever he passed, he absolutely loved this. He loved power. He loved the feeling that he stood above everybody else, and they all had to give him honor. So it says, and here's where the contention begins. In Esther 3, 5, and 6, it says, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, Mordecai, did I mention Mordecai? Mordecai would be Esther's uncle. Now, Esther's mother and father had passed, and so the uncle, Mordecai, took it upon himself to raise Esther. And he wasn't gonna kneel. He's a godly man, and we'll get to a little later on in our verses on why I believe he is absolutely a godly man. He wasn't going to pay honor to him. He wasn't going to bow down to anybody other than God. And this enraged Mordecai. and he had learned that Mordecai, it didn't enrage Mordecai, it enraged Haman. I get excited. Anyways, it enraged Haman, and he learned that Mordecai is a Jew. So, I got me an idea now. He says, I think I can spin this to get rid of the Jews entirely. And so he goes to the king and he says, hey, there's a certain group of people here dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces in your kingdom whose customs, they're different than ours. They're different from all the other people. They don't obey the king's laws. And it is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them, he says. And the king always takes Haman's word. And you shouldn't tolerate him, he said. He says that if it pleases the king, there should be a decree to issue to destroy all these. Let's go ahead and just get rid of all these here Jews. And then he says, that just in case he's truly listening, because I don't think Xerxes really listens all the time. Kind of reminds me of not Colonel Pardo, but the other colonel in MASH, Colonel Blake, with Radar, having him sign things. What am I signing, Radar? He says, in addition to all this, he says, I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business. So money? I'm certainly open to having more money in my treasury. And so because the king does trudge Haman's judgment, he signs the decree without really knowing what he's doing, and there it is. It's all set. It's all said and done. And that brings us to Esther 4, 1 through 17. Now, I sounded pretty long-winded. It's necessary to understand where we're at, because we're going to pick right up where Mordecai is kind of upset over what has happened, and we lay the groundwork of why this is a superhero thing, and it's not Mordecai, it's Esther. And we'll ooh, that's pretty good. Esther. Yeah, I like that. Okay, here we go. Follow along or read it home. When Mordecai learned that all that had happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out to the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one can enter the king's gate clothed. How uncouth. Of course you can't go in. He's in a sackcloth. You just can't be roaming around with sackcloth on. So he went as close as he could to the king's gate, and that's as close as he could get. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. And many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maid and eunuchs came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai and take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend to her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai, to learn what it was, why was this going on. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, that he might command her to go to the king to make supplication to him and plead before her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called, they're going to die. With that, shorten that one. They're going to die. Now, there's a chance they might not. If the king holds this little golden scepter forward, then they would. But otherwise, yeah, death. And she says, I haven't even been called in the last 30 days. Death. So they told Mordecai Esther's words. And Mordecai told them that, now this is about a lot of back and forth. Isn't it, don't you find it annoying where you have to be the middle guy going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? It's got to be even worse here than texting back and forth. And Mordecai told them, says, hey, tell this to Esther. Says, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. Don't be thinking that. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet, who knows whether you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, going back, so, all right, go and gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days and nights. My maids and I will do the same thing. And so I will go to the king after all this is done, which, by the way, is against the law, she says. I like the way she... So you know the branch I'm crawling myself out onto. It's against the law. So, you know, after all this, if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went out and did what she said, and that's where we find ourselves at the end of this little bit here. Okay, so obviously our hero is, well, it's Esther. It's not some big old muscly dude. It's Esther. It's Esther. Is our fifth and final hero. Let's start off the way we start off with, I think, all of our stories, and that's with an illustration. And our illustration is going to be with Abraham Lincoln, of all people. The war is carrying on. The Civil War has been the bloodiest in history before and since. It's a time where Americans were killing Americans. And that fact wasn't lost on Abraham Lincoln. He took it extremely personal. He doesn't want all this to go on. And so he was vexed quite a lot. And to find solace, or to try to find some kind of comfort in this, he would go to church quite regularly. And back then, they had services almost every single night. And so he went to a particular service in Washington, D.C. there. And let's see, where am I here? Where am I at? And he would go, and he'd take his stovepipe hat and set it in his lap and sit among everybody else with his aides and listen to the message. The preacher finished his message, and the people began to leave, and the president quietly stood up, straightened his coat, took his hat in hand, and began to leave. And his aide likes to try to make polite conversation. So how did you like the sermon, Mr. President? He said, I thought the sermon was carefully thought through and elegantly delivered. Elegantly delivered. And the aide said, so you thought it was a great sermon? He says, no. He says, no. No, I thought he failed. In fact, the preacher hadn't asked his congregation, it says, he didn't, no, I thought he failed. He did not ask of us something great. Now, this comes from a book that we had to read for preaching. You need to ask something great. Right? The preacher hadn't asked the congregation to do anything more than simply listen to some wise words, maybe. He hadn't challenged the people. They didn't have to do more with their lives other than what they came in with in the first place. And Lincoln understood one central truth about the Bible, and that was when life is difficult and the world was filled with struggles and hardships and pain. And I don't know if that sounds familiar. Let me read that again. When life is difficult and the world is filled with struggles and hardship and pain, that's exactly when, every single time in the Bible, he calls on his people to do something at that point. That's when he calls them to do something. It's a repeated theme throughout Scripture, right? When God comes in contact, and then they move in faith. Sometimes it's great things. It really is. Like for example, an ark is built. That's huge. That takes some serious faith in the Lord to do that. How about leading a whole population of people out of Egypt, and a particularly upset Pharaoh to boot, who just got hammered by a bunch of plagues? Or maybe coming to the walls of Jericho that are so big that chariots raced around on top, and you're not gonna attack them. You're just gonna walk around it for about 7 days and blow your horns and things like that. That'll work. That'll work. That takes a lot of faith and effort. How about David and Goliath? When you have an entire army that's afraid to face the man, and here comes David with a slingshot and no armor. Things were pretty perilous. And a person would step up and allow God work through this person to get these things done. Right? Could be something small. Could be something almost so insignificant, small, that you have no idea the vast difference in the world it would make. For example, a little small boy brought some fish and some bread to a little meeting that was going on out in the hillside, and he's the only one who brought it. And they asked, "Hey, anybody got food?" "Yeah, I have food for myself," but he didn't say that. He says, "Sure, I got some here." And they feed thousands upon thousands with this, and he just handed it over. It was this very small thing, but thousands were affected. You know, another even better example, it's one that you need to kind of remember here, and that's when this young lady came up to a well where Jesus was at, and he asked for some water, and she gave it to him. She gave him some water. It's a little thing. And then what had happened next is a whole bunch of people in the village that she belonged to were saved that day. And so here's my question to you, by the way. What was the little thing that she did? Do you have any idea what it was? Was it water? Was it a cup of water? It says in John 4:9, the Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. The little thing that she did, the inconsequential, itty-bitty little tiny thing that she probably didn't know that she did, was simply not allow social norms to dictate her behavior. And she talked to Jesus. Jews don't talk to us. We don't talk to you guys. How could you even be starting this conversation? But she still had it. And it was so impactful for her that she went and got people in the village, and I don't know, countless numbers got saved that day. All because she had decided that she was going to go ahead and speak to Jesus. It's just a little thing. Just a little thing. And again throughout Scripture we see people rise up to do great things or small things that have such massive consequence, and sometimes we have no idea the difference that they'll make. And so I kind of wonder when in our lives such an occasion pops up for you and me. It's just a little one, maybe. Just a little one. And we decide not to rise to the occasion to do what? Conversate, be nice, say thank you, engage. How many people do you think possibly when we don't do that, how many people may have lost their chance to know Jesus Christ? All you had to do was be nice to one person once. I was maybe too busy, or I had too much going on. I had just something. It was an excuse. I wonder. This brings us back to our story this morning. Let's start with Mordecai. There's Mordecai. That's Mordecai. You know what Mordecai is? Mordecai, he's a little excitable, is what he is. He's a little excitable. He's worrisome. He has no problems wearing his emotions right there on his sleeve. If you run into Mordecai, you know how he's feeling because he's pretty excitable and has no problem telling you all about his excitement. That's the kind of person he is. And he obeys God. He does. I'll prove that a little bit later on. But think about the position he's in, right? Right? When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. And this whole decree to eradicate the entire Jewish population is because Mordecai didn't kneel down. Now, how do you think that would go over if you decided that you're not going to go ahead and do something? Well, I don't know what it is. Maybe not wear a cloth, or we're going to do church anyways, and now all of a sudden, every single church in Talmadge is closed because we decided we're going to have church. You can't tell us what to do. Well, now nobody's having any church forever. Forever. Oh, it would make me feel kind of bad, I think. I mean, that's less than death. Everybody else is going to get eradicated. That makes a person feel pretty bad, I think. So he reacts because he's excitable in a very overreaction type of way. He does the ashes, he tears his clothes off, he's got a sack, and he goes to the gate to the castle, and he wails and moans and cries out, which is actually part of the whole get up anyways when you're in a sackcloth and ashes. And it's not just him, it's all well, it's not all, but it's a great number of Jews in their places. They're kicking up a fit. It's hard not to see the attention they seem to be drawing upon themselves. And it's so much so that, well, Esther hears about it. You can't not hear about it. It's going on all over the place. I don't know why the king doesn't hear about it, but he's probably being, kept off to himself by Haman. The interesting thing here is Mordecai, whenever Esther does this back and forth with him, in one of his messages, he absolutely expects Esther to do something. It doesn't. It goes like this. It says he gave him a copy of the text of the edict or the message or the proclamation for the annihilation of all the Jews, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him, the eunuch that's passing the message, he told him to instruct her to go to the king's presence, to go. Not, hey, it would be kind of cool if you stood up for us. No, he didn't say that at all. He said, you tell her to do this. Into the king's presence, to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Instruct her, he says. Right? Now, I kind of get the idea, I kind of get the feeling that Esther's a little bit shy. She doesn't want to get involved. She's an introvert, actually. Isn't there another way? Someone's got to do something. But I hear that all the time. That goes around for the ages, right? Someone needs to do something. But every time someone says that, they never mean themselves. They don't want to be someone. They think someone should do something, not me. Well, I'm sure Esther is every bit as sympathetic as anybody else, and she certainly believes something needs to be done. It's not me. Right? It's not me. It's a lot of pressure, I think. What's the problem, you think? What's the problem, maybe? Well, it's not a good time to approach. In fact, it's kind of like a death situation, she says. Listen, if you're not invited in front of the king, she says, then death is your... You might as well have gone up to the king and says, hey, can you condemn me to death? I'd appreciate that. I've lived long enough. I'm ready to die now. And that's kind of like what she says to Mordecai. She says, it's death, yeah. Now, why doesn't she want to intercede for her people? Is it because of death? No, that's not it at all. Now, that sounds like it, but there's something else underneath all that. She's afraid of death. Now, fear of death is the exact kind of fear that applies to a whole array of other things. Death is huge. That's true. And look at the picture we have here. That's just a shadow. Fear creates a whole lot of problems. It absolutely paralyzes a person. You can be afraid of other things. Afraid of failure, afraid of commitment, trusting others, afraid of speaking publicly. Of course they are. There's so many people, I'll tell you, they're afraid of speaking publicly. There are people afraid of being alone. It's the exact same fear. The exact same fear. It controls us. It limits us. It enslaves us. I don't I don't do well speaking in front of others. Maybe somebody else should do it. That's a fear. And it did the same thing. It controlled, limited, and enslaved a person that says that. You absolutely won't. It's not even let me think. No. It's a no. It's a hard no for me, people will say. There's some highlighters out there that'll absolutely highlight the fear, though people might not see it even then. For example, every year I'll ask people to fast with me. And every year, almost nobody does. And somebody will say, I can't, or it doesn't work for me, or something else. That doesn't change the fact that it is a fear that drives that answer. It enslaves, and it purposes your answer to something else. Fear. So she has a fear. One of the growths that God is trying super hard for the Christian to try to get through is to manage to work through fear. We don't necessarily get rid of fear, but you have to manage it. Fear has a way of keeping people with having a proper respect for the situation at hand. But you need to somehow be able to learn how to manage fear. And so, to that end, there's a lot of examples in the Bible where it says, fear not, or don't be afraid. It's so many that one of my classmates one time decided to do a little look-see and found out there's 365 times in the Bible, one for every single day of the year, it says, fear not, or don't be afraid, indicating that the Lord understands the brevity of the situation, the magnitude of the situation, how much fear actually controls our life. And to be clear, I did my own research, and I find most of the versions of the Bible has it even more than that many times. And the illustration still applies. There's a lot. There's a lot of times where the Lord's saying, hey, calm down. Remain calm. Don't be afraid. Fear, by the way, keeps a respect in place, and we need that. Like in the Army, there's a premium placed on attention to detail and listening to your leadership. If you are in a firing zone where we go to war, it's a stressful event. People are usually very afraid. But if you have attention to detail and you're working on that, you're listening to your superiors, then you're working through that. And you still have fear, but you're working through that fear because you're listening and you have attention to detail and you're able to work productively like that. And you still need that person, that higher authority, to tell you what to do, so you can still continue to manage that fear. Same thing applies with the Lord, if you're paying attention to Him at all. Okay, so fine. How can I overcome fear? Esther did. All right. What was her fear? Well, it was a big one, right? It was a big one. All the king's servants and the people of the king's providence know that any man or woman, anybody, that goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called, death. It's a whole sentence there. Just they're dead. Dead man walking, right? So she got past that. Granted, she needed a little bit of help. She got a kickstart from Mordecai. Mordecai helped her along. Near the end of the verses, Mordecai says, "Hey, don't be thinking in your heart that you're going to escape these judgments. I mean, just because you're in the king's palace, any more than anybody else is going to. Or if you remain completely silent at this time, if you do that, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from some other place." Now that's the line right there that tells me who Mordecai is. Because Mordecai absolutely believes in the promises to Abraham. Where's it over here? Abraham, Moses, and David. He absolutely believes in the promises that will make a great nation. The The Jewish population will not be eradicated entirely here. It'll still rise up. That tells me he's a godly man, which is why he didn't bow to somebody else. It's in the Ten Commandments. If you read the Ten Commandments on like one of those little placard things, they won't say bow. You have to read the actual ones in the Bible where it says, do not make an idol or bow down, and things like that. And he knows these things. He won't do it. So relief or deliverance will rise from Jews from someone else. But you and your father's house will perish. And here's the tricky part. This is the one that I think jogs her mind a little. It says, hey, who knows? Right? Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Maybe this is your calling, he says. Right? Maybe this is your calling. How does somebody overcome or manage their fear like Esther does? Well, you have to realize, and I think I mentioned that before to hammer home that word realize. You need to realize what the compare and contrast is. What's my word looking for? Perspective, proper perspective, right? Shakespeare once said that if it is to be, it may very well be up to thee. In other words, something's going to happen. It might very well be that you're the only person that can change the course of history. You might, otherwise it's just going to happen. And an example of that is, I've been doing my movie examples recently because I think they have some good. There's this one, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And there's got this one scene where Indy is being crushed by some walls with spikes on him, and he's got his a boy with him who's been traveling with. His name is Short Round, and he accidentally triggers the walls actually. And it's coming in, and he's got another companion there. It's a woman who's very, very girly in her nature, and she doesn't want to really be in dirty, creepy places. But there's a switch within the wall, and if you pull it down, you can stop the walls from crushing. And he needs her to flip that switch, right? They're going to die if she doesn't do it. And quite frankly, she's not going to get out of that place alive either, right? Kind of plays on what Mordecai is saying here. But it is a temple. It's a old place, and there's a whole. It's teeming with creepy, crawly bugs and things like that on there. And never mind, a girl who, in her right mind, wants to go ahead and put their hand in that little crevice with all those bugs in there that might sting and bite and horrible. But she has. If it's what does it say? If it is to be, it may very well be up to thee. We don't know when this situation might apply to you and I. And that's the case with this lady. And so she eventually pulls it down. I mean, it's a movie. It was going to happen. It got very close. Otherwise, there would be no suspense in the movie, right? But fear, self-driven fear, will always provide a whole lot of sub-stories and lies and try to tell us a lot of reasons why we should go ahead and just live within the fear that we have. For example, I know one way to get past this or manage it, and is completely intensified by the lies that the fear puts in place. For example, if you ignore it, it'll go away. It's probably not there if I just... Of course not. Of course not. If you ignore it, nothing's being fixed. At best, it may remain dormant, maybe at best. But most likely, it's just growing and is probably enriched and encouraged to be a bigger lie and a bigger mess and a bigger problem a little bit later on if you do nothing, right? Yeah. All if you stand back, it'll be... No, that's a lie. No. Look at it this way. If the Lord had gone to great lengths to present this problem right there in front of you, right? Probably wants you to do something about it. That's what Mordecai is trying to tell his niece. He says, hey, who knows whether you've come to the kingdom for such time as this? Is this the reason you're there, Mordecai says? He's telling Esther, it's come to your attention. You should probably do something. Now notice, Mordecai is the kind of person that doesn't just say, hey, do as I say and not as I do. He's afraid, and he's doing something. He is absolutely making a spectacle of himself. He tore his clothes off. He put a sackcloth on. He has ashes, and he's wailing loud, so loud. It's purposeful. He wants to get her attention, but he's making a spectacle. He's doing what he can do as well. I imagine he doesn't want to make this kind of a scene, but it's got motivation, purpose, and drive behind it. It takes some humility to get past this fear to do what he's doing. He's doing the same thing. He overcame his fear by doing whatever he could to try to create a situation where Esther would see this, right? So the first key is to realize that, hey, it's probably up to you, and to, I guess, add and maybe make another key to this, that if you don't do something, the problem's just simply going to multiply. It's just going to multiply, right? That's what Mordecai's telling Esther anyways. He says, don't think that because you're in the king's house, alone, separate from the Jews, you're going to escape the same punishment. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews is going to arise from somewhere else. But you and us, we're going to perish. Don't be thinking you're going to be separated from all this. It's not going to happen. It's going to just be tragic otherwise. If you don't do something about it, look at it this way. If the Lord went through trouble to present this in front of you, and you don't do anything, you think he's going to be happy? Think like a parent. You think he's going to be happy? Think like a parent. Son of mine, daughter of mine, I have decided to bring this to your attention. Your rooms are atrocious. And I brought this to your attention because I believe the overall happiness within the kingdom of the Rasmussen household would be in great peril if you do nothing about this problem that I have brought to your attention. Because as a parent, right, I'm going to be greatly dismayed if I go through trouble to bring this to their attention and they do nothing. I will not only be angry, but I will bring other rulers of the household in, namely moms as well, to be angry with me, so we could create a larger, more angrier situation. Right? The Lord's not going to be happy about all this. Of course not. Right? Of course not. The point is, Esther was afraid of death. She was afraid of personal death. Right? But her fear was maybe misplaced. There is perception issues that she has. That she may have problems. Right? Isaiah 8:12, do not fear what they fear. Do not dread it. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you should be dreading. That's pretty much what Mordecai is trying to tell Esther here. He's saying, you need some perspective, Esther. Right? You need some perspective. You might want to think that in not addressing this problem, you could be kind of irritating our Lord and God. What do you think? And oddly enough, if you're looking for a kickstart, it's fear of God that helps us all to deal with our fears. The perspective to understand where we should really be afraid of. In Psalms 34, it says the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Fears of the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him lack nothing. Now this sounds a little counterintuitive. Now, an example is that if somebody's going to give up coffee, it's too much caffeine in coffee, and so they give up coffee for some time. And in doing so, they decide to pick up drinking Pepsi. So they've simply, traded one caffeine for another caffeine. It sounds as if it's counterproductive. Maybe that was the word I was looking for, counterproductive. And the same is here. Instead of fearing one thing, you're fearing something else. You still got a fear going on there. Fear not. I've got a better illustration to drive home this point. Now, I thought that my Pop Callie might be a good illustration of this, and she kind of does all this. But this is, I have a friend that has a particular situation with their dogs that's even better. And what it is he doesn't have the same belief that dogs should be inside the house and family members the way I think a lot of us understand them. He believes the only place for a dog is outside, and that's the end of that. We're not going to discuss it. Outdoors is where dogs belong. So that's where their pup was at. They had just one dog. Now he wasn't without compassion. They had a little dog door inside of the garage where the pup went in and out, and it was warm. It had a nice bed in there. It was fine. It was a good house pet. But when it was raining out, even though the garage was there, he allowed the dog to come in and stay down in the cellar with the family. That way he'd feel a little safer. But if the dog managed to put their nose anywhere near the top step, he was severely punished for daring to come up to the top step. If the kids wanted to be with the dog, well, they did. They would go down to the cellar, play with them down there, and keep them company. There was this one time, however, that the storm was so great, and the thunders were crashing, and the lightning and the wind, that the dog was absolutely scared, senseless, and came right up the stairs, right past that last step, to try to find some solace. And didn't go to the wife, and didn't go to the kids, but instead the pup went straight to the father, the one that severely punishes the dog if she comes up to the top step. And the thinking is, and she figured that if the father was powerful enough to rule the home, he was powerful enough to protect the dog when danger arises. Now think about that for a minute. Do we believe the Lord created the heavens and the earth, or we just say it and it's for the fun of it? I mean, anybody that is able to create this magnificent universe and world we live in, you would think that they're strong enough to protect you and I as well. I'm not sure that when we have fear, that we haven't misplaced our fear. I don't know if we've realized just exactly where our help should really come from. This internal fear that drives our choices in life, I think that fear is absolutely misplaced. God's recipe for conquering our fears is, I'll point this out, I had earlier, you need to realize proper perspective is important. He is the only one we need to fear. And he has the power and the desire to protect us. And he has the desire to protect us. But it is a two-way relationship. We're going to have to want him in our lives for his desire to take hold and protect us, right? The last key in overcoming our fears is to truly obey. To truly obey. How is that? One might wonder. Well, Esther provided the example, actually. Now you got to pray and fast. And now, Pastor Raz, you're just looking for reasons to put fast into a message. No, it was a pretty big part of what Esther was doing here. She's the hero. I'm just providing information that's in front of us here. Now, fasting is something they did all the time back in the Old Testament. It was almost generic, and they used to fast every single year on the Day of Atonement, and everybody did it, but it was just the daytime. Once the sun set, they feasted out, and it really wasn't the same. But it didn't happen always that way. There was a very specific and focused reason from time to time. In Isaiah 58, 1 through 12, true fasting was not just a ritual. And it was more than just the day. It was day and night. And they have kind of a definition, fasting, based on Isaiah 58 here. It says fasting is a means by which one denies one's own needs and focuses directly on his or her relationship with the Lord and the world. And that makes absolute sense of what's going on with Esther, because she has a self-driven fear. But fasting is a means by which one denies own needs, denies one's own needs. Her needs are fear of death, but that's personal. We need to deny that to be able to focus on the Lord, so the Lord can work competently through a very willing participant in a relationship with the Lord. It focuses directly on his or her relationship with the Lord and God, in the world. And that is exactly what we have happening here with Esther. So Esther was facing death, but so many more of her countrymen were also facing the same kind of death. And now after her pep talk that she had with Mordecai, a little bit of perspective, a little bit of light was shined on the situation. And so she had her perspective in place. This is what she told Mordecai. She says, hey, all right. Go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days or night. And it doesn't say pray in there, by the way, but we associate with the fasting with praying. Otherwise, if you're not praying with your fast, then it's just a diet. So we know that prayer is assumed as part of the ritual here. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. Now, right there, when it says night and day, you know this isn't any generic fast where you go ahead and eat at night. She means 3 days, right? Don't do it. And then my maids and I, we're going to do the very same thing. When this is done, when we're done, and I have a cloak, I can feel the presence of the Lord, and I have the praying church behind me, then I'll be ready to go and do what is illegal, by the way, so you understand the peril I'm putting myself into. But at least I'll go into this with the proper foundation. And if I perish, well then I'll perish. I'll just perish. So okay, I'm going to obey God, but first I'm going to get spiritually corrected. Now that's the end of the chapter. So I gave you context leading up to this. Let me tell you how it ends. Esther wins. Esther wins. Haman hangs. Actually, Haman hangs. He is disposed of also, but a much more tragic way than the old queen. Actually, there's a lot of irony and things that go on within the story, and I think one of them is pretty funny. I'm not going to extend the message out to explain all that. But how did Esther able to overcome her fear? Now, she didn't overcome her fear. She didn't get rid of her fear, but she was rather able to work through the fear. Right? She had to realize that she was the one person in position, that the Lord had presented this to her, and she had to realize that yes, indeed, she's in position to do something about this, and she knows that if she does nothing, the situation would just become that much more tragic. And third, probably one of the most important key aspects in this, and what we need to understand as Christians, is she didn't just simply, okay, I'll attack this situation now, or I'll try to do something without really receiving any guidance. And like I had mentioned before in our illustration with the army, it's obeying and understanding the officers and leaders above us, attention to detail. She went ahead and fasted and prayed and went ahead and emptied herself out of personal needs and wants, so she could focus on the Lord's needs and wants, and those of others all around her. She made a choice. Her choice was between fearing God more or fearing the unknown, right? Do not fear those that kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both the soul and body in hell. Perspective, right? Perspective. Fear not, which is the Lord's invitation to trust in him, right? So our final hero of the day is Esther, and she is Esther the fearful. And I think it's a great wrap up of all the heroes together. I think they combine, create an image of the Christian this day and age. I want to tell you a story about a Persian general from the Middle East. This is a true story. It comes from some of the history books. And what had happened is there's a lot of strife and wars and things like that back in the day. And this Russian general, his troops had captured a spy within the camp. And the punishment for being a spy against the soldiers is death, as everything seems to be. It's a great motivator to try not to do anything bad. You will die. So the spy gets captured and he's gonna die. But as generals are, they kind of quirky in one way or the other. And this one had one as well. He had adopted a strange and unusual custom in these cases, which is why it managed to make the history books. And what it is he would always give the condemned a choice. And he did the same for this one as well. The prisoner could face death by firing squad or the Black Door. This is a true story. That was his choice. He could choose death by firing squad or go through the Black Door. And so the time had passed, and the time for him to make a decision was at hand. Right? And the general ordered the spy to be brought before him. So what shall it be, the firing squad or the Black Door? Now he was vexed. He didn't know. It was a pretty huge decision. It had to do with death. Right? Ultimately, he chose the firing squad, actually, preferring it to the unknown horrors that might lie in wait for him behind the ominous and mysterious Black Door. So not much later, gunshots filled the air, and the spy lay dead on the ground. The general stood staring at his boots, and he talked to his aide, and he says this is a quote, "You see how it is with men? They will always prefer the known way to the unknown. It is a characteristic of people to be afraid of the undefined more than the known right in front of them." Right? I gave him a choice. And the aide said, well, what is behind the Black Door? And the general says, freedom. Freedom, but I can count on one hand how many times a person was brave enough to choose the Black Door. And every one of them went free. Nobody chooses the Black Door. They choose certain death. And that's because when a person's imagination and fear runs away with them, they can imagine just the very worst possible kinds of horror imaginable behind the unknown, mysterious door. The assumption was, I'm going to die. Might as well do it in a very humane way, I guess. Shot by firing squad. The one thing that we fear most in our lives is the unknown, the unforeseen, and the uncontrolled. And I think maybe that's why we have such a hard time trusting in the Lord. Because when the fear presents itself right in front of us, it's so large and so scary, and it grips and controls our very being that we can't see the Lord, which is clearly more dominant and has far more control than any fear that we have in our lives. Right? The fear has the ability to immobilize us, to haunt our dreams. And when we're faced with such fear, it's at that very time in our lives where we most need to devote our attention to the Lord. Esther was absolutely gripped with fear. Now, the adverbs and adjectives and things like that within the language didn't really adequately describe the stress that she felt. I mean, her countrymen were all going to die. That was the decree. She had to face possible death by going to the king without permission. That takes superhuman powers just to do it, which is why she easily qualifies for our list of superheroes. Esther, who managed to work through her fears and affect countless people's lives thereafter. Could you imagine what would have happened if she decided, I don't want to get involved? Can you imagine what would happen if you decide that you wouldn't do just the littlest act of kindness this week and just say hello to somebody? Could you use some help? I know we're supposed to be 6 feet apart, but I can probably reach that off top shelf for you. Something. We seem to have a society that we live in where we are allergic to be kind to one another, so allergic to say hello to one another. And now we have this situation where it's now encouraged to have separation from one another. And that's fine. We can still do this. We're going to get through this. But it doesn't mean we can't still be servants to the community in which we live in. And we need to find ways in which we can affect change. Now there's a nasty virus going on around there, and it is fearful. But a little bit of perspective, we need to figure out what we really should be afraid of. We have life everlasting right in front of us, and I don't ever want to lose sight of that joy in my life just to have that messed up by the fear of what's going on over here. God is good all the time, and all the time. All of the time, God is good. Friends, be a blessing to someone this week. And don't forget, it's the Lord in which we receive our strength, not within ourselves. Go forth and serve your God. And I will see you on Wednesday night. And I'll see you again next Sunday as we are having our Easter service right here.